Hey everybody, are you tired and sick of me yet? I know I'm not, but maybe, I don't know. So, thanks for joining me today. We're going to talk nerdy, FMA nerdy with my good friend Chris Chiu, or becoming good friend Chris Chiu, another excellent FMA practitioner and content creator. Today, we're just kind of like going to sit back and BS about stuff. There's really nothing serious we're going to talk about today, but we're just going to have some fun. But yeah, just give us a sec while I pop him in, and yeah, we'll get rolled here in just a sec. All right, let's get it started.
What's up?
What's going on, Guro, Chris? So, um,
Is this live?
we,
Like, is this on Facebook or whatever?
yeah, it's on Facebook. I mean, we can share and go all that nonsense. So,
Got my second monitor hooked up over here, so
yeah,
definitely want to promote it and tell everyone to join in and ask stupid questions.
exactly. So today, it's I try to be a little bit less serious on this podcast to a point. Today, it's titled Two FMA Nerds Talking About Stuff. I mean, talk about like the professional structure of this podcast. Unlike the Fight House Talks podcast, where I have a tendency to dive into some really deep content. Today, not so much. I mean, we can, but I'm not planning on it. So, yeah, welcome. Do you want to go into your spiel as to who you are and what you do, or should we just assume everybody knows who you are?
I am fine with no one knowing me, but
Cool.
now, Chris Chiu, Arnis International. It's my dad's organization, which is a not a style. I'm going to say exactly what he would say. It's not a style. It's not a system. It is just an organization that he designed to further the ideals of Professor Remy Presas, the founder and creator of Modern Arnis. I grew up around Filipino martial arts for most of my entire life, and now I teach it. I love doing it. I have been blessed with. Sorry, I'm trying to share the link, but for some reason it's not letting me. Oh well,
Hmm.
whatever. Um, but I grew up around martial arts in general. My father was always doing something, and I always found an interest in it. And eventually, I started teaching it myself. I started teaching when I was 13, 14, when I got my first black belt in Taekwondo, and I started becoming an instructor, assistant instructor, then instructor. Taught that. Then I had a falling out with my TKD instructor. And then I really dove more into the FMA world. Really learned a lot really fast because it was addicting to me. You know, I some might say I advanced quickly. Well, I put in the work a lot because I wanted to learn. I didn't care about anything else. I just wanted to learn how to do this stuff. Once I saw that first video of Professor Process that my dad showed me, I went, "Oh my gosh, Dad, and you knew him?" He goes,
Yeah.
"Not only did I know him, that video, that's me getting beat up." I go, "Oh my God, Dad, you had hair. Where did that come from?" But yeah, I'm just another FMA nerd who's trying to spread the word.
That's right. It's funny. So like, there's a few type of FMA practitioners out there in the world. You have or I should say, a few stereotypes out in the world. You got like the super serious tactical type. You got those who are very strong for the people, cultural strength, and true to the lineage. They got the FMA Phil Am Americans, and then you got the wide breadth of us that are like everywhere in between. And that's the FMA nerddom, which is great because we love this stuff, and that's what makes it fun. Because it can be FMA can be really really serious, and some of it can be pretty silly. And like everybody in between, I mean, that's where it becomes really beautiful is to see everybody spin on it. Because I mean, with modern Arnis, I mean, there's the phrase "the art within your art," but
it, that phrase alone has caused a lot of controversy.
yeah, I mean, even here recently. So, but with that, but art within your art can be just like the love of the thing. I like my big deal is talking about I only do the stuff that makes me happy, and I love FMA, so I'm going to do FMA because I'm not going to use it in warfare. I'm not going to use it in combat because if I'm going to, that's a problem. So that's a whole other spiel. So in the meantime, I come off as silly, especially like all my video work is not serious content. I mean, some of it is, but I really go for the silly because I'm just some dude with a rubber chicken. Because
I
there's
mean,
so much other.
your intro is you throwing knives at a heavy bag while you're sitting on the floor.
Actually, those are rubber chickens. So,
Oh, I'm sorry.
so yeah, I mean, like there is some super serious content out there because I mean, FMA can be really, really scary because let's face it, we're learning how to stab people
Efficiently.
efficiently. That's terrifying. So this is where like the online community, the content creation community is such an interesting like landscape. And so with FMA content, where have you found is your happy medium? Or
My happy medium for FMA content, like, that's a good question. Because it's funnily and oddly enough, being real, I'm going through a bit of a burnout phase.
yeah,
But that's fine because, we're real. We're authentic here. And it's important that we discuss those types of things because I don't care what anyone says. You do this stuff as much as we do it, we get burnt out. It just happens.
yeah,
And especially with life, personal struggles, everything else gets in the way at some point. As much as you'd want to be that pure content creator, it's so hard to do that. Like, and I'm not even doing it to the level that so many other better people are, and I still get burnt out of these things. I mean, the Arnis International Instagram page that I started purely as a experiment for my
yeah.
business class in college.
Oh, okay.
Yep, I was taking small business management, and my professor was talking about people startups, people this, people that, and I was like, you know what? I kind of want to start this for my dad anyway because it'd be fun. But two, I can apply what I'm learning in class to a real life experiment, and it also gave me an easy topic to discuss when I'm doing my papers for the
Yeah,
class. My
yeah.
professor loved it. I got A's on everything because I was applying what he did in real life, and he liked that.
Well, that's
But
great because I mean, not every martial arts instructor makes for a great businessman. So, like,
most,
utilizing best practices is great. So, I mean, can you continue on with that? Sorry, I didn't mean
sure,
to interrupt.
absolutely. So I've always been fascinated with the world of business because I've also always been fascinated with the world of human interaction and businesses. I don't care what business you're in, you're almost always in the business of sales, but you're
Hmm.
always in the business of human interaction. You need
Yep.
to gauge those two things too. One definitely affects the others. Actually, they both affect each other.
Yep.
And I remember at an early age as a kid, I would always ask my dad questions like, hey, because he worked in the physical fitness industry for 30 years. I mean, I
Yeah.
watched him work for almost every major fitness chain you can think of. I watched him work for the UFC gyms when they became a thing in DC. So, like, I've watched businesses shift and their whole paradigms shift. So, I've always been fascinated by that.
Oh
So,
yeah.
I've also gotten to work in a commercial dojo, which is also where I got to see the martial arts and the business, which almost always have a hard time being together.
Yep.
I will give my former sensei some credit here. He was smart. He stuck to the martial arts. His wife did the business.
He's smart. He is very, very smart. Because I didn't learn that lesson to my detriment and failure. So,
Oh,
oh
and,
well.
and it was he realized that he sucked at the business, but he loved the martial arts.
Yeah.
I mean, most martial artists suck at the business but love the martial arts because that's what
Oh
we're
yeah.
focusing on.
Yeah.
If a martial artist had a choice, I know for a fact we wouldn't care about ranking systems. We wouldn't care about titles or other things like that because we're just so focused on the martial art. But unfortunately, with business requires curriculums, it requires rankings, it requires titles, it requires accolades, it requires this and that and this and that. Like, take the best boxer on the face of the earth, take any of them.
Yep.
If he's never won anything, no one's ever going to know his name.
Nope.
And he could be better than he could be the offspring of Muhammad Ali and Mike Tyson and the footwork of Mayweather. Wouldn't matter if he's never won a title.
Oh yeah. or if he doesn't play the game. Because I mean, think
Yeah,
about
right.
like Mighty Mouse, okay, Demetrius Johnson,
Ooh,
the
yeah.
most pleasant MMA fighter ever, but like has so many titles and gets so much disrespect because he doesn't play the game. He doesn't cause controversy. He just is an MMA nerd who also is a big online Twitch streamer and video game nerd. So I mean,
The
that's
only
an
one I could
interesting
think of who
dichotomy.
did it kind of right with no controversy that everyone loved, I don't care who they were, was GSP.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
everyone loves GSP. He's just, first off, he's just that good. Second
yeah,
off, he didn't care.
yeah,
He was there to fight, go home, and he
yeah.
won all the time. In my opinion, he was the best pound for pound fighter in the entire MMA world, in my humble opinion.
That's fair. That's totally fair. Yeah, it's really interesting. So like in the balance between business and martial arts. I mean, it's even like the scope now with martial arts instruction as a business and then content creation as a business. I mean, that right there is a time suck. Because I mean, you and I both are content creators. I mean, I think in the category of content creators, I mean, there's Paulo, our good buddy Paulo, and then there's the rest of us. So I mean, the business alone of putting content out, because I mean, you talked about burnout. I mean, I totally feel that because I mean, there's some days it's just like I don't want to do anything, I don't want to put anything out, and because I want to be mindful of if I'm putting something out, that's time I'm never going to get back. And for those who are going to look at this stuff, read it, and watch it, that's time that they're never going to get back. So I got to be respectful of that. And
Absolutely.
but I mean, the balance between teaching and then putting content out. I mean, that's and plus business management. I mean, that's multiple hats.
That's why all the great FMA practitioners wear hats.
Yeah, that's true. It's true.
Not because I'm trying to cover me losing hair. I think you're dead onto it though. Like, it's so easy to get lost in the business
Yeah.
that you forget what the passion is. And I think that's where a lot of business owners in the martial arts world lose it. I know that there's no way to say this without sounding like I'm insulting anybody. So I'm not trying to. I'm just pointing out what I've seen in the world of martial arts that I've been a part of for my entire life. When you start, so many times we start out with the best intentions of martial artists, but when you apply business to it, best way I can say this is money changes everything.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
That is the absolute truth of it all. As soon as you got, and when I worked at a commercial taekwondo school, you know, I watched kids pay, or I watched parents and families pay hundreds and hundreds of dollars for programs that were, no offense, garbage.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like the black belt team program, I always laughed at that.
Yep. Paying for belts, paying for testing, paying for everything.
I mean, in my opinion, if you're on the black belt team, you should be a black belt, not an orange belt who just got his first bow staff.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't care how good you are. But I had to teach kids who were nowhere near the level of black belt, but they were part of the black belt team. Why is that? Well, because little Johnny's family paid an extra $300 in their monthly tuition fee.
Yep. And on the other side of it, I mean, when I had my gym, I mean, overhead was killing me. I mean, there at the end, I was paying almost $5,000 a month just in my
Absolutely.
overhead.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I understand like the paid bracket
Yeah.
situation of you've got to squeeze out as much tuition as possible,
You got
but
to
I
keep the
mean,
lights on.
got to keep the lights on, and the instructors got to get paid and feed their family. But the other side of that, there's that like good business practices of, I mean, are we really? Where's the money going? And better yet, where's the money going to like the valuation of like the bracket that they're paying for? And I mean, some of the not great business practices of martial arts gyms, the McDojo, the belt factories of the early 2000s. I mean, that's pretty common.
They're still happening.
Oh yeah, they are. Yeah, and it's kind of sad, and it's actually where you're starting to see like the new generation of that is with like the online content creation community of people who are selling packages. Not saying anybody who's selling online content is a bad thing. It's just there is There's a gambit. There is a spectrum of good quality content that you're paying for a reasonable price for good stuff and getting good stuff out of it, and then there's a wide spectrum of everything else.
And it's walking that fine line between keeping your integrity,
Yeah.
but also submitting to the masses to a degree.
Yeah. And that goes back to the thing like with content creation of like you have great instructors out there who have great one-on-one, but are they great content creators? Because like a big thing that has been recently within the FMA podcast community discussed is like the future of FMA. And I mean, the fact that we're both under 50, I mean, we've kind of fallen in that category. Now the questions being is the future of FMA brick and mortar FMA schools, or is it content creation, or is it both? What do you think?
Movie theaters are a dying breed.
Yeah.
As much as that hurts to say.
Yeah.
I loved going to the movies. I still love going to the movies.
Yeah.
Sitting in that big chair with your big bucket of popcorn covered in butter while you're watching the next Star Wars or whatever.
Yep.
I don't think they're going to die off anytime soon, but I know they are a dying breed.
Yeah.
Like, brick and mortar, as much as I loved the dojos that I got to work in and teach in for hours on end, if they don't adjust to the reality, they will die off. I don't think brick and mortar schools will ever completely die off, but I do think most of them will, because they don't if they don't adjust to the realities that they're experiencing. I look at Blockbuster, or
Yeah.
you know what, better, I'll look at GameStop, because I can speak to that a little bit more, because my dad was a manager of a GameStop.
Yeah,
And,
nice.
I remember years later after he left, looking at how all the GameStops we went to when I was a kid were dying and shutting
Yep.
down. Like,
Yep.
Dad, why did GameStop shut down? He goes, because, Chris, you know what we did at GameStop? All we tried to get you to do was buy magazines.
Yeah.
We barely tried to sell games.
Yep. And toys.
And toys.
Yeah.
If they had done an online website when all of this first started, they'd be making millions of dollars.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Because they'd be the first ones to do it. Netflix killed Blockbuster for a simple reason.
I mean,
People
I think
didn't
up here,
want to.
I think Alaska actually has the last Blockbusters, either Alaska or Seattle.
Then y'all need to hold on to that thing tight, because it's a beautiful thing.
Yeah. But no, you were saying about like the death of brick and mortar in the case of games. I mean, what do you think about with dojos? I mean,
they need to adjust. They need to be more cognizant of what the market wants. You know, I'm again, student of business, so it's all about supply and demand.
Mhm.
If you are not reaching the demand with adequate supply, you'll never succeed. If you have too much supply and not enough demand, you'll never succeed. You have to find that middle ground.
Yep.
So when it comes to brick and mortar schools, I think there is a demand, because as much as people may not want to admit, little Cindy's mommy still wants her to learn how to defend herself.
Absolutely.
But more importantly, well, I don't know anymore. I've been out of the game of it for a little while, especially since COVID. After school programs was the biggest moneymaker for any martial arts school in the world at one point.
Yep.
That is it. I mean, what is Brian saying? Has online teaching killed the dojo due to ease of learning anytime, anywhere? Well, that's a good question.
I mean, the fact is, and this is going back and forth with this idea of YouTube foo. I mean, I've used this phrase I've used this phrase in a very not kind fashion. I've used it derogatorily back in the day. But I've changed my tune. I've changed my mind on that, especially with the way the world is going, and actually, more importantly, as I have matured as a martial artist, and as I've matured as human beings. The fact is, the internet has the greatest potentiality for connection and information, but we do it for other reasons. But the fact is, the internet has the greatest opportunity to provide us information and connection to people who have information. So with that, we can get in a whole bunch of information, great information and not so great, but it's up to us to have the critical thinking skill sets to discern what is good and what is not so great. And on top of all that, we have to have the discipline and the capability with good training partners to like problem solve this stuff on our own. And this is where the fact of you don't need, I don't believe, as a former instructor, as a former coach, I don't believe you need to have your coach there, sitting there with you against the Makiwara board, sitting there against the bag, teaching, having you drill angle one, jab cross, 4 hours on end. Now they can come in afterwards and fix stuff, but if it's you sweating out and putting that equity into it, that's your process, that's your journey. And much of what can be done is you get the information online, test it out, and then ask questions of somebody who has more answers or more experience than you. I mean, do you think so?
Well, it's funny you bring that up. I remember Paulo brought up a question like that on the FMA discussion at one point about can you learn from online learning versus, I don't remember the exact question, but
Yeah.
I've always viewed it as this because a lot of my FMA training was in-house, but
Yeah.
a lot of my outside FMA training was online. But I'll put it this way. To a brand new, never done martial arts before, needs to go to a gym.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Needs to.
Yep.
He needs to learn something basic first. I can learn a lot of things online now as someone who's done this for a long, long time. I know what to look for.
Oh yeah.
The average Joe Blow, what's up, June? How you doing, brother? The average Joe Blow guy online who's never done it before can't do that, you know?
Yeah.
Because they don't know what they're looking for. And I made a comment on the question at one point because I said that in the dojo training, there's one thing it can do better than any online training. It can help you see your flaws.
That is correct.
And I'll put it simply, if I do a jab cross and I watch a guy online, let's say I pick some boxer online and he does this. That's his jab cross.
Yep.
I'll do that for years until I go to a place where I get my ass kicked because I wasn't taught the proper fundamentals.
Or the application of it.
Or the application of it, exactly. You can mimic someone and be pretty good. You can.
I mean, as a child of the 90s, I mean, I grew up mimicking Power Rangers and Ninja Turtles and Surf Ninjas. I mean, I just did. I mean, fortunately, I had my dad, my uncles, and everybody else in my martial arts family. But the fact is, a lot of my experience of self-reflection and experimentation of martial arts was from mimicry of what I watched on TV and cartoons. I mean, it's just what it is. But putting it to work and testing it out with my brothers, my uncle is my father, or my training partners, I got corrected. So, and I mean, online content can be a point of inspiration, but seeking out valid sources with experience is really important. Like the case that I've run into is, it's not a secret at this point that I am a student underneath Guru to Han coach Belton Lubis down in Washington for Balintwalk, PTK, NSI, just a bunch of stuff. And like something that I ran into is I've been problem solving through Balintwalk for a while now, and there was like this little subtle nuance of like punching something and rotating the fist. So like doing this outside block and punching, where I was rotating over, and the video work is like, oh yeah, this looks cool, this feels fun, and then Belton's like, dude, punch and keep a stick on the outside because it makes more sense. I had no idea until he looked at it and said, hey, fix that. Because I thought in my own, like, hey, this works. Because I mean, a cross is a cross, and punching with a stick and a cross is still a cross. But for the sake of the content of Balintawalk, that's wrong. And it required me to have my senior, to correct that. But I want to figure, I mean, I could have figured that out on my own eventually. But for the sake of having an online content to train under and then having somebody correct it, it's like, it's still valid to have an instructor. But do I need to be in a gym for that? I don't know.
I think at some point everyone does.
Yep.
I think especially like if online, let's say it's your only source is online learning, that's totally fine. It's better than doing nothing.
Yep.
But at some point, like let's say you learn through video packages, like you buy a certain tier platform, or I don't know exactly how online package, like I know the FCS curriculum has like tiered systems on their websites.
Yeah,
You
I
can
think
buy a
PTK has
certain
got like
tiered
that too.
system.
Yeah.
And that's great. Let's say you only learn from that tiered system for 6
Yep.
months. That's great. At some point, someone's going to need to see you do it for real and make sure you learned it correctly.
Oh yeah, they got to touch hands with you and
They
make
got
sure.
it.
I mean, just the timing, space, and application alone. There's only so much you can do with solo work.
Well, we both worked in kickboxing gyms.
Yep.
I could teach someone the best kickboxing combination. I can have them jump rope faster than anybody. I can do bob and weave drills for hours on end. I can have them sweat blood. They could be the baddest dude in the world.
Hmm.
And nothing prepares you for the ring like getting punched in the face.
That is correct.
Nothing prepared us for stick fights until we got hit with a stick.
That is correct.
And getting hit by a Dog Brothers guy with a stick, I have a new appreciation to it.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's just so like what's great about, and this is where the balance comes in play. Of you have online inspiration and direction for curriculum. You have your own discerning eye and critical thinking skill set to figure out what is good and what's not, as to based upon your experience, exposure, and education. The other part about that, if you don't have the fix it immediately with a gym and a coach, is you have good training partners, and that's huge because I mean that all that experimentation of your range, your timing, and all this other stuff happens with your training partners. But the caveat to that is you and your training partner still needs that supervision and correction from an outside senior source, I believe at least.
I agree with that completely. Like having a training partner definitely is the next best thing.
Yep.
Like, because one of you will pick it up
Yep.
if you watch those videos and you want to go, wait a minute, like hold on, like so and so had their hand this way, but we have our hands this way.
Hmm.
So maybe we try this. I don't know, but and then you go meet the guys, you go train with them. The cool thing about this stuff is like, especially the world of FMA, it's such a small world.
Oh yeah, I
Like
love it.
we can find anybody.
Yeah.
Like I've never met Paula before. I've never said any words to the guy I think online, but I have tons of friends who could talk to him about it.
Yep.
I have never met Grand Tuhan, but I know tons of people who have. So if I had a question about PTK, if they couldn't solve it, they could pass it up the chain of command.
Yep.
I have never met some of the other Balintawak families, but I've got friends who have. So, like, the online learning has gotten easier with
Hmm.
the social media aspect of it. Because, I mean, that's how I met the Balintawak family in South Florida. That's how I met June, was through Instagram.
Yep.
And I watched him teach something at Grandmaster Chad Bailey's house, their number 10 disarm, and I'm like, oh, that looks cool. I want to try it. Didn't do it correctly. And that next time I met him in person, like a week or two later, he goes, hey, that disarm you did, let's work it.
Yeah.
The world is so small.
Oh yeah.
We have so much access to people.
And that's great because the fact of the matter is, because the FMA community is so small, that means we have such an opportunity to have such influence, change, and in-house course correction, provided the siblings can spend the time to say, "Hey, what's the greater good of the family here?" Versus like the little catty fighting. Because I mean, that happens among siblings, as it does within the FMA community, and as it does with any other community. But the cool thing about what FMA is doing now, where everything's being documented online,
Our
is we
fights are
have
cooler.
yeah, our fights are cooler, our online fights are phenomenal, but we have this opportunity to like document the progress moving forward into the next generation. Because let's face it, with let's say karate, taekwondo, like the classic Asiatic martial arts, all that stuff, all that blood, sweat, and tears of course correction for curriculum happened 50, 60 years ago, even to a couple hundred years ago. And FMA, especially this new generation of Western FMA, so Philam, European, American FMA, I mean, all this stuff is online.
Yeah.
And it's a rare opportunity to see where the divergence is going to be into the next generation, especially with the way with modern combat sports practices are and the experience from the combat sports world into FMA, because the cross training alone is setting us apart from the majority of the martial arts community.
I would completely agree with that. I think that there is just so much that we. What did
It's grown a lot.
Oh, and I think that that's the beauty of what things like this is, and you know, Fight House podcast forums that are coming around, like Carpool Kali.
Yeah.
Got to give myself a little plug there, but like
Oh yeah.
the discussions that we're having now are is what, in my opinion, is really going to keep the art alive, because the techniques, the training, that's cool, but no one knows the why of anything we
Yep.
do.
Yep.
And that's where the discussions that we do, you know, that matters.
Yep.
I wish my dad would write a book. He won't, though. So every chance I get to interview him about Remy, I'm gonna, because my dad is one of the few people who really didn't just train with Remy, but he knew Remy.
Yeah.
My dad saw Remy, once a day for years.
Yeah.
He wasn't just a student or a seminar rep. He was one of his guys because he loved the man. He cared about the man. He sought after the learning and the training.
Yeah.
Not disparaging anyone else who didn't do that. Not saying one's better or the other. Just that was what he did. And he has so many stories about Remy. And when we'll do training and I'll ask, well, why did Remy do this? Oh, Remy did this move because of this. But no one knows that. Well, why doesn't anyone know that? Oh, because he didn't tell anyone that. All these greats, these old GMs keep things close to the chest, which I get. Trade
Yeah.
secret. But we need guys like my dad who were not just a student of the technique, but they were students of the why.
Yep.
Why Remy did what he did.
They're the bridge.
A bridge, and that's where I guess we're going on back to the question of like, is the future of brick and mortar schools versus online training, like the future of FMA as a whole, all these things. Discussions are what's going to keep the art alive.
Yep.
Talking about it, word of mouth.
Yep.
No one was there. Maybe not everyone here agrees with this. I'm a Christian. I read the Bible. No one was there. No one is alive today that can tell me what exactly happened in the temple where Jesus flipped over the tables. No one can tell me what the color of the sky was. No one can tell me what the birds sounded like, but they wrote the story down.
Yep.
Because that's how you keep things alive, is through storytelling and through chronologically, right, or chronicling everything.
Yep.
That's why the internet is so great, because once you're on the internet, you're there forever.
That's correct, for good or otherwise. But documentation is one of the hallmarks of civilization. Because without documentation, how we're constantly reinventing the wheel. I mean, we're doing that anyways. Because like, what's interesting is back in the '90s and the 2000s. I mean, it was Taekwondo for everything. And the problem that I ran into during that time frame when I was fighting and doing the NASCA circuits and doing like my pre-Olympic stuff and like all my stuff back in the '90s and 2000s, I don't have video of it because one, the technology wasn't there.
Yeah.
And just the fact of my father and coaches never recorded this stuff, and I'm not the only person who had this problem. So a lot of the stuff is like by word of mouth story or looking back at old documentation from those events. What's cool about like today, 2023 and moving forward, is we have so much capability to video document stuff, disseminate it, and have it as record. And I think this is what's really separating the current generation from the previous. It's not that it's better, it's just it's different, and it's a resource that we need to embrace and continue on using. So because now there is no way that we can like question whether it works or not, because if you got it on film, then and there, I mean there's proof. I mean there's little nuances that can change otherwise, but the fact is video documentation solidifies it as forever proof of an occurrence. Whether it's contrived, that's a different story, but the fact that the video is there is huge.
And the video, it gets the word out. Like, I know that my dad, when Professor died, kind of took a step back.
Yeah.
Like a lot of people did, but more than just take a step back, he didn't want anyone to know he existed. Because he stuck with Grandmaster Jack Hogan, God rest his soul, in Jacksonville, because Remy told him Remy told him to, and that was it.
Yep.
My dad didn't see much of. He didn't even see much of Chad Bailey or Bram Frank, and they lived in Florida.
Yep.
because he didn't want to deal with anybody. So in doing so, a lot of people didn't know who he was while the rest of those guys were making their names.
Yeah.
Like, I've always said this, that my father's the best martial artist no one's ever heard of.
There you
But
go.
now, through the Instagram and through the connections I've made, people have heard about his name. There have been videos on our Instagram that have been seen by 1.4 million people with my dad in it.
Yeah, that's awesome.
I started that page to get his name out there because so many people didn't know who he was.
Yeah.
They knew Professor, of course, because he was Professor Remy Brazos. And they knew, like, Dan Anderson because he was a world champion karate point fighter.
Yeah.
They knew Ray Dianaldo because he was the creator of FCS Kali.
I mean, it's Ray DeLeon. Yeah, it's Jim Ray.
And as Tuhan Ray will tell you, my dad helped him with his modern Arnis training.
Yep.
Way back when. And he still praises my dad for that. He got mad at once because he asked me, hey, remember Anyo 4? I said, Tuhan, what's that? He goes, what? Your dad had me doing those forms for 4 hours. He never taught you one of them? I go, nope, he never did. But
I mean, yeah, go ahead.
I'm just like, that's the thing. Like, that's the cool thing about the documentation and the social media platforms that we have access to, and the internet and the YouTube as a whole. Because once it's there forever. And at some point, in some way, shape, or form, someone will see it.
Yep.
All it takes is one person hitting a share. That's it.
It's apparently we should talk about your carpal collie as a plug.
June, why are you doing that to me? I don't like self-promotion. But but so that's an example of, why I do what I do with carpal collie. Actually, it was an idea. What is this? The screen changed.
Oh yeah, this is talk about carpal collie.
Oh my gosh.
I have the power. For those who are watching who have not subscribed to Guro Chris's YouTube channel, here it is.
Some of those videos were controversial. Is your system
Oh, yeah.
unique?
Do it. Oh yeah, there it is.
Thanks.
No, I mean,
really appreciate that. But
no, I mean the documentation is huge. So like the problem that I ran into, especially like back in the '90s and the 2000s, is I mean my dad was military and we moved around a lot, and so I was getting bits and pieces of martial arts training at a local gym or a dojo wherever I could. But a lot of it was just me and my dad training at the YMCA or at the local college, just doing whatever. But I got little snippets here and there. But in the same, like we got a little bit of video content. Talk about Tuhon Ray. I mean, that his old video that like Paulo did like 15 years ago. That was one of my first like major introductions to the wider scope of FMA beyond like my own background. Seeing that online I mean, it's a game changer for me. And what's interesting about that is now there's such a proliferation of that content that everybody has the opportunity to have that point of inspiration. Because I mean, like the thing that I ran into also back in the 90s and 2000s when I was fighting at NASCA is like I was one of the only people doing Kali in the forms competitions. However, there's no video work of it. So it sucks. But I mean, this is like I was competing against people like Gemma Nguyen, John Su, and it's just
how many of those forms did you make up on the fly?
Oh, so many of them. Pretty much all of them.
Because my dad did the same thing back in the tournaments here in Florida. Because, so first when he did it was his kung fu forms that no one knew how to judge in the karate tournaments.
Yeah.
Because he did Southern White Crane Kung Fu that none of the karate judges knew how to judge, even though it was hilarious. And then the stick forms, which he made up on the spot, which he told me a great story of. One of the judges actually said, "Oh, I would have given you a higher score, but that you didn't do that move correctly to the next sequence of the moves." And he was like, "I made up that form on the fly."
Yeah. I mean,
I did that all this form. I just made it up.
Yeah, I did that all the time. And I mean, that has actually been the case of like a lot of the FMA community. I mean, Datu Kelly talked about that back in the 80s with his bow staff form. Yeah.
Yep. He's the man.
Yeah, he is. I'm going to see him here in August, and then I'll be down in NSI for September. So
you gonna go to Water and Steel?
Oh yeah, tickets bought. So my training partner Cooper, he's coming down with me as well. So this will be a good time for us to, yeah, it'll be fun. Our little adventure from Alaska.
I'm going to Water and Steel next year, so
sweet. We'll see you there.
Come hell or high water, I got to meet Datu Kelly Warden.
Yeah, he's a trip.
He's scary.
Yeah, he is. Funny story. I mean, so when I went down to West Coast last year, there at Belton's gym, Datu Kelly was a guest instructor there as well.
Hmm.
And it was funny story enough. When I went down in general, is I was being introduced to the wider FMA family, the Balintawak family, and so we were talking about this before, but I was getting felt out by everybody, and like GM Bobby smacked the crap out of me with a stick and was awesome. Dr. Dr. Kelly was stabbing the crap out of me with an aluminum trimmer, and that was awesome. But it's definitely like this whole thing of like what the online digital space does is people see you, but they don't know you. And then when they finally get their hands on you, they can actually like figure you out. And
Yeah.
that's also something that's really cool about the modern landscape of FMA on the social media and digital landscape is you get an opportunity to like be tested out without like the hostility. Because like the days of the dojo storming, I mean, it still happens. And I've been in
God, I wish it still happened.
Dude, I've been a participant of it and been a recipient of it. And yeah, it's been an experience. But now they get to see like who's this guy on the internet. Then they come down to a camp. It's like, oh, let's put some hands on him and see what he can do. And it ends up being a little bit less hostile. I mean, it can be, but
Not always, because I've
yeah,
lived it the other way.
yeah. Well, tell us that story. Yeah.
I won't give names because I don't want to be disrespectful, but being a younger martial artist, I'm only 27 at the time of me starting my real, like, online journey was I was 24, 25.
Yeah.
So no one knew who I was, obviously, because I was nobody. No one should know who I was.
Yeah.
But they saw me working really hard and training, and a lot of people thought I was just some schmuck who wasn't good. Like, there have been several times I remember where people looked down at me because I was younger, that one dude in particular, I'll never forget, said I wasn't qualified to do what I was doing.
Yep.
And I was like, look, if you don't think I am, we can have a go. Like, not to be mean or a dick or combative, but if you don't think I know what I'm doing, I'll first off tell me why.
Hmm.
And second off, well, actually, first off, I don't care what you say because you're not making my rent. So
Yeah.
I do this because I love doing it. I don't care how old I am.
And
I
that's
also
the
don't care
one.
about your opinion.
Yep.
Because I love teaching. So when these guys were like, "Oh, Chris, I don't think you're good enough for this, or you're qualified for that, or I don't think you're ready to do that type of stuff," I'm like, "Well, I'm going to do it anyway because I've gotten enough blessings from the people who matter to me to say do it."
Yeah.
Not everyone is super nice about the social media. That's where I talk about the. It's one of the greatest things that separates us from almost every other great nation in the world. The right to free speech means you can say whatever you want without, as long as it doesn't cause harm to someone else.
True.
Which means
But
I'm saying, which means that everyone has a platform and everyone has a voice.
true.
Not everyone should, but everyone can.
Well, I mean, free speech doesn't necessarily mean free of consequence. That's the
That
other
is
half of
100%
that.
true. Yeah.
Because there's always consequence for whatever we say, as like there's going to be consequence for what we say today. But I mean, the fact is, it is up
Right
to
on.
us not to self censor, but the fact is for us to have integrity and speak with passion, but with truth. So our truth is that as it is. But that's the case of like martial arts in general. We believe stuff. We believe what we're doing is good and the technique and otherwise, but we have to also defend that technique by proving it when we're being tested. And it doesn't necessarily have to be combative, because the fact is we always have to defend our position, but that
Mhm.
doesn't necessarily that's a bad thing, because to have an opinion, you also have to like explain that opinion in a intelligent manner.
Well, and it also comes back to what are you claiming first off?
Yeah,
Like, I've met several systems that claim they're the super combative whatever. And I'm like, well, then when the guy challenges you to your combative whatever, you better back it up
yep,
because you're claiming it's unbeatable. You're claiming it's this. You're claiming it's the crap that don't stink.
yep,
Not everything that you do in martial arts is going to be combative. Sorry to everyone watching who doesn't want to hear that.
nope,
Some things were designed for attribute training.
yep,
Push ups are not combative, they're an attribute training.
Sinawali.
I have a hot take on Sinawali that people don't talk about enough. It's not even a hot take. It's just my belief that Sinawali, yes, it means weaving, but to put it in a way that makes people understand it a little simpler, I teach it as this, and my dad and I have worked through this. It teaches you to move both hands independently of the other.
Yep.
You're teaching ambidexterity without even realizing it.
Yep.
Like, I can do a lot of things left-handed.
Yep.
I can't write my name, but I can do a lot of other things. I can cut with a knife. I can cook. I can do a lot of left-handed martial arts techniques. I've tried shooting left-handed. I'm not the worst at it, but I'm also nowhere near that good at it. But
I was going to work on my left hand dominant eye thing as well,
which is a whole other 2-hour conversation we can get into. But Sinawali is designed, in my opinion, the secret of it is that it's teaching you to move both hands independently of the other.
Yep.
I can do chopsticks with 2 hands. That's hard to do.
Do it simultaneously? Yeah.
Exactly.
So, like, today it was supposed to be talk about FMA nerd stuff. So let's talk about some FMA nerd stuff about Sinawali. So I talk about this all the time. Sinawali for me, especially with neurocognitive rehabilitation from CTE and MTBI, because I just have that from years of concussions and the life that I've lived. So with that, what Sinawali does for me, and I talk about this all the time, is that Sinawali, in a very technical term, helps with complex cross-body patterns and helps with the remyelination of damaged nerve endings, and also it is another form of saying that this is um, dealing with bilateral symmetry, where you're using both hemispheres of your brain and both hemispheres of your hands and body to engage your brain to work. And what it's doing is help find new neural pathways for concussions, for post-concussion syndrome. So what it does for me is it's health. I use it for health. I mean, I was butchering that whole explanation, but I use it for health reasons because I need to get as much out of my brain as left as possible because I deal with seizures now. So what Sinawali does for me though is allows me to like tap into that cross-body patterns to not worry about the complexity of combat, but it helps me keep moving and have that focused attention. And also, it's good overall because I mean the complexity of it all makes you problem solve. Because if we're just stagnant, one hand, one arm, I mean we're cutting off a lot of our mobility. So
I absolutely agree with that, and I think that you have made a breakthrough that people definitely aren't aware of. That it can be not just an attribute building, but a mental rehabilitation.
well, I'm not the only one. So Guro
Jackie.
McCartney from Cognitive Collie there at UCLA did a phenomenal video and study back in like 2017, I think, talking about this issue about crossbody patterns found in Sinawali and what it does for like firing different centers of the brain. And what they found is as they made things more complex, the brain was more active versus having static singular impact movements, say like with karate with single striking patterns. The brain wasn't as active. So having the complexity makes the brain work more and has an opportunity for higher intake of learning. It's kind of like the garden hose approach of taking a bunch of information and your body processes it and your brain processes it later versus having like the singular hyper focused thing. And it's interesting. It's not like it's bad or good. It's just it's interesting. And we don't know enough about it to speak to see it's bad or otherwise, but it seems to be in a healthy um, process for rehabilitation for head injuries.
I can see that completely. I mean, definitely the clacking of the sticks definitely activates the brain.
Yeah, it does. I mean, you're dealing with multiple ranges, you're dealing with angle work, you're dealing with timing, spacing, you're dealing with multiple threats. I mean, that's a lot of information. So, like FMA nerd stuff, or say self-defense nerd stuff. Okay, you're dealing with this aspect of dealing with a lot of information coming in at you, have it process it, and then apply a technique and strategy to mitigate all that potentiality of a threat. And what Sinawali quite literally does is that you have a lot of information coming at you. high risk and high reward, but you have to process it there immediately with that garden hose approach. So,
No, that makes sense.
yeah.
What did June say? Also depends on your intent. If you intend to use it for exercise or research, going to connectivity, etc.
Yep. Yep.
You should shut up, June. You're just a CrossFitter. No, June's very smart about these things.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And that's another thing we can talk about for FMA nerd stuff. Just going on this line of thought of, it's okay to do something just for fun.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not every bit of training, and I hate people who do this. Our art is a killing art. You're doing this, you're going to become a tactical combative killer, and you're black. Shut up.
That's why I have this thing. It's why I use this thing.
My dad asks a question that when we go to big seminars or big camps, he asks a question. He goes, all right, how many people here have been doing FMA longer than 5 years? People raise their hand. How many people have been doing this FMA stuff longer than 10 years? All right, cool. How many of you have ever been in a knife-on-knife fight? Maybe a couple hands.
Yeah.
But the hands went from 30 being up to maybe 2. Yep. You're not doing this stuff because you plan on getting in a fight.
No, because if you are, that's a problem.
Remy said it best, and I have it on one of his videos, and I've cut it, and I've trimmed it just for this specific clip on purpose. I have the other full video otherwhere, but Remy said this. He goes, I am not training people to hurt anyone.
Mm-hmm.
I'm training people to enjoy life.
Mm-hmm.
He even said, if you have the knife and he is a real killer, shoot the person.
Oh, yeah.
And run away.
Yep.
And he goes like, they may call me coward, but I'm still going to enjoy. He says, I will enjoy life. I will enjoy steak and lobster.
Yeah. Because, I mean,
he doesn't want to do this stuff to kill people. None of us do. And if you do, in my opinion, you shouldn't be in martial arts. You need therapy.
Yes. And again, this is why the why matters. I mean, two constant things I am throwing out there with my content, back to like content creation. The majority of my videos are labeled, is it FMA? Because I mean, is it like whatever I do? Is it FMA? I mean, that's a good question because I'm asking for myself and asking my audience, do you think it's FMA? And better yet, what defines FMA? The other thing that I ask constantly is, what is the reason why? And the why, of course, changes over time and based upon the subject matter and the circumstance and the people you're talking to. So when I was in the Army, when I was attached to the infantry, I was a combatives instructor. And being a combatives instructor, especially with a Filipino martial arts background and combat sports background, I dabbled in some other stuff. And so the things that I taught specifically when it came to weapon use is that we're using offensive knife techniques because our job within the infantry is to meet and close with and destroy the enemy. So with that, offensive knife work is definitely in the play. So I taught a whole bunch of offensive knife work. But the point being is that was particular to the military, particular
That's
to
your
combat.
audience.
Yeah, it's the audience.
And if you're doing it for that reason, then that makes perfect sense. It's when the guys are saying like, oh yeah, this is full contact, life or death situation. You're teaching it to Miss Tammy, who's just doing this for a workout.
Yeah.
She doesn't care.
Now, when I talk to like self-defense and personal protection for women's self-defense, I'm of the belief that weaponization tool usage is the primary medium which we should teach for women's self-defense. That's just another man telling you. But the point being is, tools mitigate a lot of things. Where physicality, force multipliers work. And so with that, using weapons offensively to defend yourself is perfectly valid. Now, teaching it to like my 10-year-olds when I had the gym, not so much.
No, your tools were lightsabers.
Exactly. Or foam noodles or rubber chickens. But the skills that we were learning, the attributes that we were learning by utilizing offensive knife work with a foam noodle, LARPing,
absolutely transferable.
Absolutely transferable, especially with knife boxing. Okay? Yes. Knife boxing has been a thing on and off online for years. And there's a small niche of us that really do a lot of knife boxing content. But the fact of the matter is, if you think about like the combat application from and skill sets from a boxer and put a knife in their hands, is it the knife or is it the boxing or is it both? And that's really interesting. Yeah.
It's I think especially with knife stuff, and I've done a lot more knife stuff recently than was ever taught by my dad. And my dad had a rule with knife stuff because Remy had a rule with it. Remy, and after watching more of his stuff, I truly believe this. So if anyone says otherwise, I would love to speak to you more and ask your opinion on it. But
Hmm.
Remy did not like to teach knife on knife
That's fair.
because, and my
Yep.
dad said this, because it always led to death.
Yep.
There is no mutual interaction when it comes to knife on knife. Someone's going home dead, or someone's
Yep.
going home and someone's not going home at all.
Yep.
Because you have to have that mentality when you're doing knife stuff.
Yeah.
So
You
when
do.
you're working with knife stuff, and especially, I think full contact knife fighting is a joke. So no offense to anybody.
That's
Because
fair.
when I did it a few times, I stabbed the guy in the face twice, but he kept coming at me because it didn't stop him. So I
Yep.
punched him in the face and it stopped him.
Yeah.
Because it was fun. It was a sparring game of tag with a knife.
Hmm.
I prefer, if we're gonna do knife fighting. Honestly, the closest thing to reality knife fighting is point fighting.
Oh, absolutely. I love knife tag because it informs and teaches so many other things, not about the lethality, but about all the other fighting principles attached to it.
Oh yeah,
Because I mean, the fact is, you put the pointy in, and the other person quicker and more violently than they do. I mean, that's knife fighting 101, and you do it through ambush and surprise. So, I mean, diving
big
into like
surprise and bounce of action.
exactly. So, I'm trying not to be serious with this one, but the fact is, I've been in several violent altercations, just given the fact of my upbringing, growing up in California, and some like criminal gang activity. So just that. So I've been stabbed a few times. I've been shot once or twice. So, but the fact is, particular to the knife, okay, the knife. I have never been in a duel with a knife. Now that's either fortunate or unfortunate, but the fact of the matter is, it was always by surprise. It was always by ambush. I got stabbed with a box cutter. I got stabbed with a craft knife. I got stabbed with one of those like exacto blades, and it was in a random crowd. Dude walked up, punched into my chest, like up here, or punched into my thigh, and there was no like, stand back, good sir, let's have duels. It was ambush. Then one of the other times that I got in a knife altercation, it was a little crappy pen knife that a dude pulled on me when we were in the barracks while he was drunk, and it was like a little $2 knife. Now, fortunately, I smashed his face into the wall, but that was a fun conversation with the CSM the day after. But point being is, it was never like, you have a knife, I have a knife, let's duel.
Let's
That's
go.
not the case. Yeah, that's silly. That's fantasy, or that's not the scope of our reality. I'm not saying that that doesn't happen, because there's documented cases of that happening all over the world.
Yeah.
But in the sake of like a modern FMA practitioner in the West who does this stuff all the time, that is not my reality, because there's so much other skill sets attributed to that that keeps it from being my reality. And I think that's the scope of what martial arts is supposed to do, is inform us of the reality of violence.
Well, so and we can definitely keep. I love this conversation about self
Yeah.
defense because it's one of the things I'm very passionate about.
Yep.
If you're at a, and this is for anybody, if you're at a quote unquote self defense program and it's your day one, and you're not being shown statistics, you're not being shown the reality of the world,
Hmm.
and the first 5 minutes you're being shown how to do jab cross, you need to leave.
No. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I agree.
Because I remember going with my dad to one of these. He taught it at a college university. His student was a electives coach, and he taught it for the group. In the first 30 minutes, they didn't leave the chair. They just sat down for 30 minutes
Yep.
because he wanted to reveal to these people how really bad the world. My dad's a former cop. My dad's been
Yep.
a lifetime martial artist. Lived in China. Lived in California. He's seen a lot,
Yeah.
and has had friends in different various organizations and lettered agencies that have given him statistics. We're like, no, the reality of the world is a lot scarier than you think, and no matter how good or trained you think you are, everyone's just as likely to die.
Yeah.
Not to make it dark or depressing. In fact, one of the greatest illustrations we use is that he sets up his phone, doesn't say a word,
Hmm.
and it's weird that if he stands in front of the people and he doesn't talk, they'll stop talking because they'll want to. They're like, what's going on? He'll
Yeah.
set a minute timer on his phone and he'll just let it sit there.
Hmm.
Won't say a word. And everyone there realizes, oh my God, that was the longest minute of my life.
Yeah.
Because that's what it is. A minute is super long, especially in a life or death situation. Especially if you think you have time to call the police, you have time to do this. The first things people need to be taught in self-defense programs is situational awareness,
Mm-hmm.
and everything changes when you have someone else with you.
Oh yeah, and the other fact is that the opponent, the enemy, has a big say in this,
Oh yeah.
despite your plans and preparation. Because like the other side, so using acronyms, you have Fs. Okay, you have fight, flight, freeze, fail, fucked. Okay, I use fail because you failed to make a decision, failure beyond your control, and then you're just fucked because there's just you can't ninja your way out of a meteor. You can't ninja your
Fubar.
way. No, yeah, I mean, this is what happens. I mean, you have highly skilled, trained professional soldiers get mowed down by a 10-year-old with a dishka in an entrenched position behind a doorway, or mortars hit. It just happens when RPG hits. That's just beyond your control, no matter how skilled you are. Because the enemy, the opponent, always has a say in this, as does the universe. So that's the other part about like the reality of self defense is the fact is no matter how skilled you are, there's always that little X factor that will have a big say in the situation.
And it all goes back to like limiting the circumstances you're putting yourself into. You know,
Yep.
I would tell my ex this all the time because she would work and then she'd go get gas after she closed down work, and she'd leave work at 10 o'clock and go to the gas station right by it. Oh, I've done it for years. I was like, well, why would you do that? Oh, because I need gas. You can wait until tomorrow
Yep.
when it's daylight,
Yep.
because I don't care. The entire time she got lucky by the grace of God, nothing happened to her, but she's just like, you're putting yourself in a circumstance that you are more likely to be at risk. Not saying you're
Hmm.
going to be, but you're more likely to be.
Yep.
I mean, my mother taught me as a kid, as a single mom, without, my parents split, dead, whatever. But a single mom with two kids, she had a hard time parking in parking garages at night.
Hmm.
Because she's a single mom with two kids. She'd be in trouble.
Yep.
So she would actively avoid parking garages because she knew it would limit the risk she was putting herself in.
Yep.
These are
That's
all.
critical thinking. Critical thinking, preparation, and risk management is a big part of the self defense continuum that the people who are trying to do empowerment teach you how to do 1-2 punches and bash, bash, bash. They're selling you techniques and a product rather than a skill set and a mindset. And unfortunately, the going back to content creation, falling in the category of everybody else, there's a lot of everybody else who just like sell you the technique and not actually put you down to do the hard work. The hard work is the statistics, the research of law, the research of the likelihood of dealing with potential threat where you're at. Like location is a big deal.
Do you take the
Uh,
same route to go home from work every day?
Yeah, or you had a meme, or I think it was either you or Ryan had a meme about like the back of your car as to all the stickers on there and how much that tells you about that. Oh,
Mm-hmm.
absolutely. My favorite one up here in Alaska, because Alaska is a phenomenal state to live in. But Alaska, the stickers on the back of your truck gets to determine and tells me often how big of a gun and how many guns you have in your truck. So if I want to, yeah,
If I see the NRA sticker on the back of a car at 10 to 1, you got a gun in it.
absolutely. So,
I'm
but
not
again,
going to mess with your car.
yeah, and that's again that's the mindset training, the higher education rather than the skills and techniques. Because the physical skills and techniques are important, but you can do that throughout the long term training. But like the upfront boring stuff, that's not sexy. It just isn't.
And that's why there's so many tactical programs
Yeah.
teaching gun stuff. I'm like, the civilian's never going to need to learn how to do that.
You know, so clearing a room by yourself in full kit, cosplaying and LARPing as a combat ninja sniper medic. What do you think about that?
You mean when they're clearing rooms with long rifles?
One person clearing the room with a long rifle in full
What a
regalia.
freaking! I love it when they have a shema and they have the nods on. I'm like, where'd you get this stuff?
So in the
I think it's
military,
stupid. I'm sorry. I think it's dumb that they. I mean, I understand why it sells. It's marketing. It's genius marketing. But if you're teaching little Susie's mom how to clear a room with a full kit on, with a M4 with 6 mags on your vest, nods on, you got an earwig in, like, and you have the Crytek gloves, like it's silly. She's never gonna need to know that. I remember my mother when we were coming home from somewhere, me and my older brother, but we were still little. She
Hmm.
thought the door was unlocked, or she found the door was unlocked. She went to
Hmm.
the neighbor next door,
Hmm.
and they did what they needed to do.
Yep.
Instead of trying to be the hero and investigate, because she realized I've got 2 small boys with me
Yep.
whose lives matter more than mine do. I'm going to get some help.
Yep. Key
That's
thing they teach.
self-defense training.
Key thing they teach us in the military. Okay, day one, battle buddy. You don't ever do anything alone. You don't go to the bathroom alone. You don't eat alone. You don't sleep alone. You just do everything in pairs because it teaches accountability, teaches team effort, and it also teaches that to win a fight, you don't fight alone. You fight with overwhelming force, overwhelming numbers, and fire superiority. So, John Wick cosplay wannabe clearing the room in full kit and regalia by themselves, either as one, they're the first responder being serious here. They're the first responder running towards fire and they are doing what is necessary.
They
Or
have to.
two, they have to do it. That's professionally they have to do it, or they're just again they have to do it. The other part about that is the issue of they failed the tactical situation themselves because me, average citizen, clearing the house in full kit and regalia means I already lost the fight because I don't
Okay.
have a team with me. But if I'm the first responder on site running towards fire, say like an active shooter, that's a different scenario. But and this is what, again, teaching the mindset and talking about that is really important in these self defense tactical schools of like, hey, what is the real circumstance of what we're actually training? And what is the profession that is attached to that that really enforces the reason why. But if you're cosplaying and you have the delusion of cosplay, that's a problem. And again, that just goes along with the whole issue about marketing is not being professionally um, having professional integrity as to what you're actually teaching people.
Well, I've seen a bunch of these guys on the internet that, I do a lot of knife deployment videos. They're fun. I don't consider them combative. I've
No,
never carried a knife right there on my appendix. I've never carried a long fixed blade sticking right there. I
yeah,
can't move in it,
awkward.
but it's
It's
just for
awkward.
fun.
Yeah.
But when I see the guys do like, join my program, I'll teach you how to deploy your knife and then go for your firearm and shoot on the move. I'm like, do you have any idea what you just taught that civilian how to do?
Hmm.
You taught them how to miss terribly and shoot the person behind them.
Hmm.
Have you ever tried shooting on the move? It's hard. You need thousands, tens of thousands of repetitions to just get good at shooting statically. Now you want to shoot one-handed, canted at an off angle running.
Yeah. The fact is, what people forget is in a gunfight is it's fire superiority, and so you can maneuver.
And it's
So
usually whoever shoots first.
yeah, but it's that you bring more guns than the other person, and you unleash hell. And it's not about like the pinpoint accuracy. I mean, there is pinpoint accuracy, of course, but it's fire suppression. That's about lots of bullets downrange so you can move, and the
Oh
other
yeah.
guys keep their heads down. But as the one man John Wick, I'm gonna save the world. That's not the reality. And that's again the problem and the responsibility we're running into as content creators, especially within our niche of FMA, of what are we sharing, and what are we doing with it,
Yeah.
and better yet, how truthful are we doing uh, what we're doing. And again, this is why, I mean, I get a lot of crap about this. The rubber chicken. I get a lot of crap about this because it's silly, because it is silly, but I do it intentionally because what it does, it mitigates some of that really dark knife cult, like scary shit that's attached to FMA. Because let's face it, when you're doing your I stab you here, I stab you there, you bleed out, I go to femoral, I go to the blue worm, that shit's scary. Okay. But doing it with a rubber chicken allows me to have the conversation about it and disarm like the uncomfortable nature of it.
I agree
Well,
completely.
while demonstrating some skill. But yeah.
People in the FMA world and the tactical world take themselves way too seriously.
Oh, they do. They
And
do.
that's where I think good content creators like us, we don't.
No. Because the fact is, like the means of the audience. So you got 80%, which is the majority of student base that's going to be out there to lead the fight to the or lead FMA to the next generation. Then you got brackets that are otherwise, and like the top 1% of the 1% are the ones who are actually going to use this stuff. And even then, I mean, even like the 10% out of that may use that because of profession, either they're soldiers or military or personal protection agents. But the fact is, the majority of the community out there who's learning FMA is doing it because it's fun. And they're
Yeah.
most likely never going to use it. But it doesn't mean that they can't learn it and be honest with themselves that they probably are not going to use it. Because if they are going to use it, that's a lot to ask. I mean, there's a lot to ask a person, average soccer mom, average dude who works a 9 to 5 job to say, hey, you have to plunge a knife into a guy's throat. That's a lot to ask. But
Yeah.
we digressed into some dark stuff, but still, FMA nerd stuff.
Because it's about the culture. It's definitely a
Yeah.
comment on the culture that we live in. So,
Yeah. So with that, what do you think? Like 10 years moving forward with FMA, not just the online culture, but just FMA in general. What do you think are some of like the strengths, some of the things that we got to worry about, and what we're doing all right?
strengths, we're getting our exposure.
Yep.
We're definitely getting our names out there more, which is good because FMA still needs to be known by more people.
Yep.
You know, Arrow did a great job of showing Sinawali.
Yeah, they did.
Did a terrible job at showing people how to fight with it.
That's true. Hey,
Because
they had
all he did was when Oliver Quinn beat John Diggle with Heaven 6 was he went faster and swung low.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there was a TFW Chris sword in there as well. I mean,
Yeah.
that was kind of cool.
So that's one of our pluses. We're getting our exposure out there.
Yeah.
You said strengths, weaknesses, things to work on.
Yeah.
Weaknesses. Too many people think that they're right and damn everybody else.
Yeah.
Like, there is still so much of this. Well, I did this, so I'm correct. Well, I did this, so I'm correct. When, why can't you both be correct?
Yeah.
Or maybe you're both wrong. Now,
Yeah.
again, I'm saying this as someone who is 27 years old. I've not lived that long, but I've lived long enough for me to start formulating my own opinions on people.
That's fair.
And I've seen enough people who swear that, oh, well, it's my way and no way else. Well, then I don't want to learn from you. I talked about this in one of my videos I did.
Yeah.
I forget which one. But it was like things to look at. The 3 things you need to look at from your instructor is if he is refusing to let you cross-chain, refusing to let you ask questions, and just arrogant. Those are the 3 things you do not want to be a part of. I don't care what system. I don't care if it was a system given to you by Bruce Lee himself. If that instructor is that, you don't want to learn from him.
No.
So there's still too much of that going on. And especially in the world of FMA, the world is so small as it is, we don't have room for people like that. You're taking up space for good people. You know, and things to work on. Stop taking yourself so seriously, everybody. Yeah. And I'll tell you why that is. G and Baba didn't take himself all that seriously. He has fun when he teaches.
Oh, yeah.
My dad has fun when he teaches. I have a blast when I teach. The 2 questions I ask at the end of every class or every seminar I've done is, did you learn something and did you have fun?
Yeah.
Because that's what matters.
Yeah.
Did you laugh? Did you enjoy it? When I taught a seminar in Statesboro, Georgia, and there was a bunch of kids, which I wasn't expecting, I threw out the knife. I wasn't teaching knife to a bunch of children.
Yeah.
I taught them empty hand trapping, and I fed it into the people's elbow.
Yep.
And they all lost it.
Absolutely, because it was fun.
And it was fun. I guarantee they might not remember what I showed them combatively, but they did. Oh, little Johnny, what'd you think of someone? Oh, mommy. This guy did a people's elbow on one of my instructors.
Well, the fact is, the fun is what makes it sustainable. There's the reasons why. Because again, talk about the 80, the 10, and the 1. Because the 80% are there for fun. Because if you make them, force them to do the hard shit, unless they have it in them, they're less likely to come back. Because that's just the way people
Absolutely.
are. So it's the 10% that's going to be there as soldiers, and the 1% who's going to come out there as a professional. Like the thing that I ran into with my gym is, yeah, I had a fight team, but that was my 10%, my 1%. I had three guys that are like my 1%ers in the gym, but out of like the 300 people I had in the books, the majority of people were kids, soccer moms, dudes in the middle and that are middle aged, and my they did the same training, but the reality is we had to have I tried to make it as fun as possible because the fact is if I was beating the shit out of them every day, they weren't gonna come back. Now, my pro fighters, that's a different
Different
story.
story.
My LEO guys is a different story. But for like the majority of my staff, my clientele, my students, it was teenagers. It was kids. So I had to make it fun because I had to build that trust and I had to build that rapport of saying, hey, we get a little lesson out of this, a lot of physicality, but at least it gets them to stay there and enjoy what they're doing. And that's what makes martial arts have that longevity is if we love what we do because it's not because we have to do it because we have to be violent and proficient at violence. That's a professional standpoint. We love what we do because it's the art standpoint. That the art is what makes it long sustainable. Because the problem that I ran into, and looking back at this, because I do a lot of retrospection at this point in my life, is starting out and just giving my childhood, my upbringing in the martial arts. I like took stuff from everywhere because I mean, moving around a lot and training at different gyms. I had a wide variety of different teaching styles and methodologies and just different stuff. So that informed like my approach. The problem that I ran into is when I got pigeonholed into the combat sports world, tactical combatives world, it was very much like it has to work. This is it's combat efficacy and efficiency. And I was in that negative space of like YouTube foo is bad. If it's not combat related, it's bad. And that was a very small window and it's very narrow minded on my part. Looking back at it now, since I have shut down the gym and moved on and doing a different part of my life, it is about the fun because I want FMA. I want my martial arts to be fun because that means I'm more likely to do it more often. And I'm not necessarily preparing to go to war. I am preparing to play in the backyard with my son. And that's where, I mean, that's the art side. That's longevity. And I think the FMA community and the content creation community may need to have like that 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 look in themselves and say, "Hey, what am I putting out there? And am I invoking a sense of inspiration for fun and longevity, or am I targeting specific for this niche?" And I mean, that's kind of important. So,
Absolutely. If I'm not, we're not saying it's bad to teach the serious stuff.
yeah.
Like if you're like my dad, I got to go with my dad to a couple of his private lessons with some secret people.
Hmm.
Completely different training methodology than anything I've ever seen him do.
Yep.
Completely different,
Yep.
and it needed to be
Yep.
because those are the guys who do stuff for real.
Yep.
Then I saw him teach a bunch of kids.
Yep. Yep.
No seriousness. He was making jokes. He was balancing the stick on his forehead. Just having fun.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with doing things for fun. There's also nothing wrong with being serious when the time calls for it.
Yep.
But if you're serious the whole time and you're sitting there in your chieftain stance with the stick in the crook of your arm and you're sitting there saying, my art is the killing art and I've done this and I've done that, shut up. Respectfully, shut up.
Yeah, I agree. And I think this is just like again having back to like the online perspective of people seeking out information online is that the discerning eye of what am I looking at, having the critical thing of is this the right stuff for me to be watching and trying to mimic and learn because the scope of reality for people is if I'm just average Joe Schmo who works a 9 to 5 job, do I really need to do the real combat specific related FMA stuff. Am I ever going to use it? Probably not. Now, if I'm military LEO that's in those communities, probably yeah. But like the average purveyor of somebody on Instagram, I mean, are they really going to do that? Are they really going to do the training? Or are they just going to swipe left at the next flashy video?
Such is the life of a content creator.
Yeah, and this is where like the question I run into for the FMA community in general is what are we putting out there? What messaging are we putting out there?
I'm sorry, I'm listening, but I also want to read this question. It's a long
Oh,
one.
yeah. Yeah, this is a great question or statement about the reasons why. And again, the reasons why. Yeah, the reasons why matter, and the reasons why differ
Quick
between.
plug: FMA Connects is amazing, encouraging females in FMA.
Yep. Yeah, like I said, what this comment from FMA Connects is saying is again, it's the very much about the reasons why, and the reasons why change, and the reasons why vary between people, and that's okay. And I think that's one of the things that we need to work on as an FMA community in general is that to appreciate and accept and encourage everybody's reasons why being slightly different.
Mm.
So I don't know.
FMA is one of the few arts, in my opinion, that you could enjoy from the community to the train, all those things. You know, it's karate. The culture is very different.
Mm-hmm.
Taekwondo, the culture is very different. FMA,
Oh, yeah.
You come for the community, you stay for the training in FMA, in my opinion.
And lunch afterwards.
Well, that's what I mean. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's when I went to that one FMA thing, FMA, and they skipped lunch. Thought it was a sin. I was like, "You're sacrilegious! How dare you!"
Yeah, got to eat that rice.
They wanted to go to a seafood spot. I'm like, I don't care where we're going. That's where the real training and community comes from. Is the food.
Yeah, that's where you get the actual stories and the conversation, and then you get to learn. You get that wisdom of the why from those who've been there and done that. Because I mean, there's only so much you can take in from like learning and drilling techniques, but when you really get the reasons why the instructor teaches the way they do, and why they're teaching in the first place, that that comes in the conversations afterwards. And I think that's actually one of the big strengths that we run into with the online FMA community, especially the podcast community, is when we get past like the standard like interview of like who you were, what did you do, what did your daddy do, and actually dive into the reasons why and who the person is. Because if we're in an FMA forum, everybody does FMA and everybody has pretty much good understanding what FMA is.
Yeah.
But what makes it unique and interesting is getting to know the person who does the FMA, the reasons why, and why they love to teach it, and that's important because that type of documentation is really important. It's actually one of the things that separates us versus the rest of the martial arts community, at least just in my own viewpoint.
I completely agree with that statement. I mean, Jesse from FMA Pulse does an amazing job at that.
Yeah,
Like,
he does.
everyone who watches FMA Pulse knows you're going to see an FMA instructor. They don't know where he's from. They don't know where he's been. They don't know that he got into this because it was his family or because the teacher of this art saved his ass in a fight. You know, that's the stuff that matters.
Yeah, yeah. And those are the stories that need to be documented, not the treatises of technique and tactics, because humans figured out how to kill each other a long time ago. The tools
Way before,
change. Yeah. The tools vary based upon culture and technology, but the reasons why is what matters, and that's what varies, and the stories is what varies, and that's what's going to sustain it to the next generation. Because the problem that we run into is like we get the heavy dogmatic rhetorical approach of like the super serious. It lends to being just that, and you run into like you miss out on so much of the art. So, because like in my case, my primary FMA background, especially with my family lineage, focuses on the single knife because it's military related, it's combat related. Then we threw this. I got involved with a single stick later on, but when I got really introduced to FMA properly, that's when I started playing with like double stick, knife and stick, swords, and things like that. But again, that is based upon exposure. Now, several years later, the things I still go back to that I enjoy, the knife work is always my bread and butter. Single stick is always my bread and butter. There's certain things in FMA I just don't like. I mean, I don't like doing Daga Espada. Just I don't. I got crucified about that later else earlier, but the fact is I just don't like doing it. It's just
I don't like it
not,
either.
it's not my scope of reality.
I like
But
having a free hand.
yeah, same. I like grabbing stuff. I like punching stuff. So now it's okay to have my opinion. But the problem being we run into like the scope of the FMA community is you have to like it all. But no, sir, I can like what I like. And that's okay, I think. So at least that's what I believe.
I agree with you completely, brother.
Yeah. So we've been at this for an hour and a half, and I know you have an early morning. Do you have anything you want to like plug, close out with, or any last thoughts on our nerddom?
You plugged the YouTube channel, so Instagram Arnis International, Facebook or Instagram Arnis_International is the page that I run for my dad's organization. Facebook Arnis International, Instagram the Martial Arts Nomad, same as the YouTube channel. Yeah, I mean, contact me. We can talk about martial arts. I love talking about this stuff. I love talking FMA, and let's keep talking about this stuff. I mean, that's why we're here.
Yeah.
You know.
I'll plug in all your details in the comments for everybody to follow you and chase you down online afterwards. Do you have any like events that you want to talk about coming up that you're attending, or even like FMA news? What's going on FMA wise that's coming up here soon?
I'm, I'm teaching at a seminar in Jacksonville this weekend, but that's very short notice. A big weapons defense seminar that one of our affiliate schools is putting on. I got asked to teach some stuff there. Big one that I'm going to promote just because it is so important to me. Grandmaster Brian Zielinski is hosting the Legacy Camp for Modern Arnis in September of this year. Thank you, Jackie. My dad will be at Kansas City at their school in August 26th. I'm going to try to make it, Jackie. I really am. Because I know I want to get some more barbecue. But yeah, Brian Zielinski's Legacy Camp is the biggest modern Arnis gathering of OG students, to my knowledge, in the country, maybe even the planet. And there's so much knowledge there. I can't stress that one enough. It's so fun. I went the first time it happened 2 years ago. Not the first one, but the first one I got to go to was 2 years ago. And it was so insane. The amount of, and that's again what we talked about. The real learning happens at the dinner table, or the lunchroom. I got to hear so many stories about a man that I've heard about my entire life.
Yeah,
it's pretty insane. But
well,
I also, go ahead.
Oh, I'm just saying it's the tribal thing, the tribal knowledge, tribal wisdom, generational wisdom. It gets lost. So.
And just because you reminded me, I want to promote it as well because I got to talk to Dr. Kelly Ward not too long ago. I want to promote his event. I don't know when that's happening. You would know more than I would. Also, GM Bobby's event, West Coast Camp, because I love GM Bobby. His West Coast Camp's coming up soon. And yeah, here's why I'm promoting all of these. Even though events that I'm not affiliated with, I will not be at, because I did a video in the next episode of Carpo Kali. We'll be talking about this. Why it's important to make the journey.
Mm-hmm.
I got in the car with a good buddy of mine, Chris Lacava, who from Stockton Multi-Style and a bunch of other things. We talked about that for 45 minutes or something like that. So go to seminars, support the people. It's fun.
Yeah, it is.
Go to Homer, Alaska.
We got a boat. Take you fishing.
Kirk,
we'll burn meat in my backyard and hit each other with sticks.
I'm game.
It'll be fun. So yeah, I'm gonna put those posters back up. So this is happening here in a couple of weeks. My shining, wonderful brownness is going to be at West Coast again. I don't know if I'm testing. I'm still very much level 0. So I'll be going down to my southern migration to go do GM Bobby's camp there, and I'm really looking forward to getting hit in the face again with a stick and having lunch and get to hang out with the family. So there's that. This will be my first time going to Water and Steel. Same situation. I want to get hit in the face by a wide variety of amazing people, and I'm really looking forward to it. So, people, you should go to these. These are great. And for those who have gotten to know me in the online FMA space, if you want to actually touch hands with me and cross rubber chickens with me, those are the two places to do it here soon. So, other than that, so the reality for me is because I live in Alaska, everything is online with me because there are like a half dozen FMA practitioners here in Alaska. A lot of them are former students or training partners of mine. There's a new FMA instructor that moved here to Homer, which I've gotten exposed to Serrata with, which is great.
Oh,
His name is
that was very fun.
yeah, it's Virgil Navarez. So for my Homer people, check him out. He's a great instructor, good friend of mine. But the fact is, the the gene pool, to use a term, the Filipino martial arts community in Alaska is really, really small. So with that, other practitioners like myself are forced to have backyard groups and try stuff online or travel south and do seminars. So yeah, we are in the time that we have to do it online, but we should go travel. And I'm fortunate that I can finally travel to go do these things. So as everybody else, you're all very lucky because you all live down south and driving is great because you can drive all day and cross like 5, 6 states. I drive all day and I'm still in the state of Alaska. So uh, traveling's cool.
Tell you what, brother, you come down to Florida, I'll introduce you to all the cool people.
I need to make a southern trek to Florida. That's one of like 7 states I haven't been to.
I know all the cool people in FMA in Florida. Not all of them, but I know a lot of them.
Nice. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I'm trying to make a concerted effort to make it to Florida.
In June, I saw your comment. We'll go together to Alaska and we'll fight on an igloo.
We're going to go really, really north for that one. So
I've been to Barrow. It sucked. It was cold.
Yeah, it is.
My older brother pushed me into the Arctic Ocean.
That's fun.
It was freezing, man. I'll never forget that. I was like 12. It was freezing.
Yeah. I was up there doing some National Guard stuff back in the day, but we're pigeonholing. So everybody, thanks for hanging out with us and talking nerdy. Anybody got last comments? Save it, or we'll do it later. But also, like, I'm doing these intermittently. This is besides the Fight House Talks podcast. This is just kind of like something that's unscheduled, more or less. I try to have these a little bit more fun rather than the Fight House Talk podcast where it's a little more serious. But here we can actually talk about some fun stuff within the nerdiness that is.
I wanted to get more controversial.
We can do a part 2, 3, 4, however many you want, because we are two dudes on the internet. So
Lapu's name wasn't really Lapu Lap. No.
Lapu. Yeah. I mean, we can. Well, yeah. Anybody?
Panantuk, and it's spelled Panuntuk.
Oh God. So, I mean, if everybody wants to come on this show or the Fight House Talks podcast, just contact me and we can throw in the rotation. In the meantime, thanks for hanging out with us, commenting and sharing and doing all the stuff and listening to us just talk about FMA nerd stuff. Oh, yeah. Anything else?
I'm waiting for someone to cuss me out right now, just for funsies, but no one's doing it. Oh, well.
Oh, well, if that's the case, I'm going to drop us out with the outro.
Direct all of your hate messages to Alicio Barra on...
Nice. Well, everybody, thanks, everyone. I'm going to close this out and let's go ahead and stay in the thing here with me, Chris, for a little bit. And
have a good night, everybody.
Night, everyone. Later.